Get your basics covered first with Izabela Wisniewska from Creatos Media. Brought to you by Majestic. I'm David Bain and this is SEO in 2022. Izabela, what is your number one SEO tip for 2022?
Yes, so I'm not gonna say anything fancy. If you expected that, then I'm sorry. My top tip is actually to cover your basics first before starting doing the fancy things. And I'm not saying don't do it. Don't do the new stuff and the nice stuff and the pretty stuff. Definitely, I'm not saying don't do that. But I've seen so many companies and brands and even like a big brands that either haven't done SEO before or just done a little bit of SEO, and then they try to do all these new, great, pretty things, whereas they don't have their basics covered. So they don't have their on-page content for some reason. They don't have their technical aspects covered. So like even the things that we would expect to be done, like getting rid of some old code and something that we're not using anymore. This is usually not done, and then they're trying to do all this great fancy, how I like to call it fancy. It's like a new stuff that we didn't used to do back in the day, but it seems to not work. Or like, oh, why don't we rank? Why we did rank and why we're dropping? Why we're doing this? Yeah, where we just written the blog post or something. Whereas do your crawls, like do your technical audits. Make sure your tech is like up to date and is spot on. I do understand that there's probably no CMS that can handle all SEO recommendations, but make sure that whatever you can do. So like, I think this is my favorite one, because when I do a lot of SEO audits, and when I see like, unused JavaScript, unused CSS, pretty much every single audit that I do. And this is something that we should really cover at the start, right? We should be getting rid of that before we push the website live. Similar with you don't have H1s, or you don't have, or your titles are not optimized. These are the basics. These are like SEO 101 that I was taught, and everyone probably was taught when they started. Like, do your optimize your titles, optimize your headlines, and people for some reason stop doing that. Like, I understand and I know there are new things that tend to work, and obviously that's great. But if we don't, we have to walk before we start running, basically. And this is what I think people started struggling with a little bit, because they want to do everything new, and they kind of forgetting. Maybe they don't have time, but they're kind of forgetting of, okay, so we can probably scrap the basic ones. Let's just jump to running straight away. And so I would say definitely make sure you do that, and make sure you educate your staff as well about doing this, and probably not only your SEO staff, but even your PR people and other people that should know how these things works. So this way you will really avoid simple mistakes that then you will have to go back and redo.
Okay, so the basics so far, we've got technical, we've got on-page, including H1s and Titles, removing old code, including JavaScript and CSS, doing crawls and technical audits, educating staff, including PR people there as well. So quite a few things there as well. Maybe diving in slightly greater depth in terms of what each one is and any additional elements there. So for on-page, you talk about H1s and titles. Are there any other absolutely key elements that are on-page that are part of the basics that need to be right first of all?
So like all the ones that we know, that the basic ones, so H1s, titles, content on the page, that's a key that is missing usually, because whereas they brands tend to have H1s and titles and maybe even alt tags. They may be not optimized, maybe they are optimized a little bit, but usually they're missing content. So some content on the page needs to be present. Like we don't really want to just push the page without anything on it or with just the pictures on it, unless it's like the absolute for the brand that it has to be this way.
So what's the minimum then in terms of content for each page? 200 words?
It's really my favorite every SEO's words right now. Be careful, common, yeah. It depends. It depends. Honestly, it's I can't say 200 words because it depends what kind of business are you running and what kind of page are we talking. If we're talking a category page, 200 words probably going to be enough because you're not going to write an essay about red shoes for women, let's say. You could do, but probably for the category page, this is not what people are expecting. So I would say. Kind of try to think what people are expecting and what they want to see. If we're writing an article, for example, or like a research piece, or more like an informative piece, then obviously we want more words. And then how many words? Depends on the industry, depends on the subject. Just make sure you don't like brag too much. Make sure it makes sense. Make sure it looks natural. But just try to do what people are expecting to see. But we do need some content, some sort of a content. It has to be appropriate for the type of the page, but we need some. And then, as I said, H1s, titles, alt tags.
And what about H1s and titles? What's your go-to in terms of standard structure for that? Any particular length for H1s? Any particular format for titles?
So H1s, I know that some crawlers tend to say like, oh, this H1 is too long. For H1s, I would say just make sure that it's actually, because sometimes, for example, people would use a blog title or an article title for H1s. That makes sense. That makes like a total sense. Yeah. So I would stick with that. Yeah, I wouldn't. Obviously, if it doesn't make sense, make it shorter. Like make sure it makes sense. For titles, obviously, we want to keep like under 60 characters. So we want it to display properly in Google. So we want it. We don't want it too short as well. So we obviously want it to explain enough that you have to remember that the title is what people are seeing in Google search results. Yeah. So they're seeing a title and they're seeing the link and they're seeing a meta description as a basic, and then sometimes a bunch of other stuff. But we want the title to actually say what they're getting into. Similar with meta description, even if the meta description is not something that influences ranking, but it does influence like click-through rate, because this is the first bit that people will read on your website. So below 60 characters, but like make sure it does make sense. So if 30 makes sense, I would say it's fine. For me, it's like natural and what makes sense. What is, what is the most relevant, what people would expect. We have to remember that we have to do right by, maybe not, maybe that's a wrong wording. We have to think user first, and then Google probably will be happy. If we try to think Google first or like any other search engine first and try to like forget the user, different times, they won't be happy.
And what about unused JavaScript and CSS? I presume by unused JavaScript, you're talking about things like tracking codes for software that's not used anymore.
It might be anything, honestly, but something like you said as well. So I've just took the ones that I think that my favorite ones from like the crawls and the technical stuff I do. But honestly, just do your crawl first, yeah, and make sure, because you might have got rid of the unused JavaScript, but you might have something else. So don't stick like the JavaScript thing. Just do the technical crawl. So
what's your favorite software for doing crawls at the moment, and what specifically are you looking for?
Oh, my favorite is Sidebulb. Like I absolutely, I'm in love with that tool. So they really, how do I say it? You're really getting the value for what you pay for. You don't pay much, but you're really getting the value for it. They've got this, they're visually amazing. So I like Screaming Frog as well, and I do use Screaming Frog as well, because they tend to have like a little bit of a different view on the website. But Sidebulb is depends what type of clients you have, or depends where you work. But sometimes if you want like a nice visuals, or you're just like a more visual person and it speaks better to you, they're amazing. They're brilliant, honestly. And also I think they're good for like people who just starting out in the industry or in technical, because they've got this amazing library. You honestly can just click through from the crawler. If you're not sure what type of error you're dealing with, you just click through and you've got these amazing, huge articles and resources that you can refer to, and you can understand it better. Even maybe not only for the people who are starting, because obviously even if we've been in SEO for ages, this is the industry that's still changing, and we might have not worked with that particular type of client before, and we might not have this particular type of error, and then we can just click through straight away. We know it's exactly the same thing, so they're absolutely amazing. The only thing with Screaming Frog and with Sidebulb, they like a machine-based, computer-based. So if you're looking for a web-based crawler, then my go-to is DeepCrawl. They're slightly more expensive, but you can just like get it going on the web and forget about it and come back to it.
So is there a general rule in terms of size of site? And if the size of site is more than X number of pages, then you'd go for DeepCrawl instead of something like what you suggested?
I haven't honestly dealt with that kind of thing that I would need to go to. The only thing that I've dealt with, but I actually had to jump from Sidebook, but they dealt with that now, was the Shopify websites. If the website was on Shopify, then I had to use deep crawl because Shopify has this thing that it's blocking crawlers, and if the settings are not set properly, then it takes honestly ages. And obviously, being computer based, that could go on and on and on. But they dealt with this now, and they're pretty good at it now as well. So honestly, I wouldn't really. The only thing I can think of, if maybe I haven't had this situation, but if maybe I had like a huge Shopify site, like absolutely huge, and then even if the settings were right, my computer based wouldn't be like, it would have to be turned on, because honestly, I had situations when I tried to use computer-based crawlers and my computer was turned on for days, and then internet snapped, and then I came back to it and said, oh, sorry, internet connection was broken. I was like, God. So I had to turn it on again. So in that kind of situation, I would go for web-based, so like for deep crawl, just in case. But I hadn't, honestly, after they dealt with their Shopify settings, I didn't have that kind of situation.
Okay, and something else you mentioned was the importance of education and educating other staff in the business, including PR people. So let's take PR people as an example. So what should you train PR people about SEO? Because obviously you don't want to tell them absolutely everything about technical SEO because it would just bore them to death. So what do you tell them in order to educate them?
That's one of my favorites. So what I meant by this, I definitely didn't mean like make them specialists in SEO, but we have to understand that marketing, because SEO is obviously part of digital marketing, it works together. It has to work together. So we've got different channels, but these channels basically got the same goal, and they tend to work together. It's like for PR, we've got a piece on the website, that we probably want to rank, and we want it to be optimized, let's say, but we also want it to work from the PR perspective, so the journalists are interested in it and that kind of stuff. So if our PR team, I think that's the closest one, but also dev team should be educated a little bit in technical as well. But for the PR team, if they don't have the basics, so that, as I said, like they're working, usually PR is working with the content team, like to make it like PR, ready. And then if those people, content team and PR team, don't have the basics and they don't consult the SEO, then we've got, I don't know, I've seen situations like they've written a piece that should be informative and like PR friendly and kind of not product focused, that they try to rank for very silly keywords that it just didn't add up. It didn't make sense. So we just get these unnatural things that Google hates. So if let's say we work in an agency, I work in an agency, so it's like easier for me to explain. If we work in an agency and we are a digital marketing agency, in my opinion, all the staff should have at least a basic understanding. I'm not saying like a, ability to do it, but like a basic understanding of what we are actually working towards and how are we going to achieve it. So like we need quality optimized content to rank for in SEO, let's say. So they understand that, so we can't stuff with keywords, let's say, or we can't do that because it's not quality, that kind of things. This is what I mean. So we have to, and similar for opposite for the SEOs and the PRs, that what kind of content the PRs need, at least like a basic, overview. So we're not making like back and forth, like, oh, but you did this. This is not good for SEO. Oh, so what do I have to do? You have to do this. And just like, wasting time, the back and forth going like, oh, we need that. Oh, but I didn't know you need that because I wasn't educated in it. Whereas if we were similar with devs, so like with development teams, you've got this back and forth with, oh, this is needed for SEO. Yeah, but we don't really want to do that. We don't think it's good. If they were educated a little bit in the technical SEO and how Google works and how other search, I always say Google because obviously how search engine works, we wouldn't have these conversations like, oh, please do this. Oh no, we have all this other stuff to do. Why would we do this? We don't think it's needed. Whereas if they knew it's needed, if they were educated in it, they'd be like, oh, okay, we try to make time for it. That's what I mean.
So you've talked about several elements that you believe to be the basic side of SEO, the basics. Are these basics likely to change at all? We're talking about 2022 here. What about moving forward, 2023, 2024? Are we still likely to be talking about the same basic elements of SEO?
Everything can change. I'm not Google, but I think we had this, like we had title updates, and we had I know meta description doesn't really influence the ranking as such, but we had meta description updates, like they had 150 characters, and we went to over 300 characters at some point. But I think like the core, that we need the content, we will need keywords somewhere, somehow, we will need quality content, that will remain probably, in my opinion, because they need kind of something. They do need something. It's like we've been hearing about links, that the links will disappear. To be honest, I think since I've started working in SEO, which was 2013, I've been hearing things that, they're not going to look at links soon. They're going to find something else, and they didn't. Let's say quality metrics are changing. Yeah, so they want more quality and better and better and better things, but they still want this good PR around our website, being a good links, good websites talking about us. So I think the core basics are not likely to like go away at all. They might be changing like stuff, but I don't think it's gonna like go away completely.
Okay, so if an SEO is hearing what you're saying and thinking, actually, I haven't done a crawl on my website for a long time, I've probably got loads of unused CSS and JavaScript on my website. There's lots of things that you've mentioned here that I probably need to be doing, but they're very busy. What's one thing that they will have been doing consistently for the last 5 years or so, and they're probably doing it on autopilot, it's not as effective as it used to be, that they need to stop doing in order to spend more time focusing on what you recommend?
So from my opinion, from what I've seen, people tend to, for some reason, tend to believe that pushing out as much content as we can is the way to go, because obviously we shouting about quality content and Google like in fresh content and that kind of stuff. Whereas actually, if you have time to do quality content like every month, well, by all means, go ahead and do it. But the first thing is the time, the resource, and then the ideas as well. So if we are better off doing one great piece of quality content every quarter, than actually trying to push. Some people even try to push like 500 words every week just to push out some content. And I remember that tend to be a case, like people used to do it, and all people used to do it, but it's just not. It's not that quality that users and search engines are looking for. As I said, if you've got ideas and if you've got time, by all means, yeah. But if you need to refocus on something else, or if you just have this one amazing idea, not 10, just do this one amazing idea and do it really, really good, instead of doing 10 of like, yeah, maybe better, but I have to push something out, so I'll push it out. That's
great advice. Great advice. Yeah, I like this website called Conversion Rate Experts, and they only publish one great piece of content every so often. I don't know how often it is. It's maybe just once a quarter or so. But when they publish it, they've got wonderful case studies in there, and they email their list about it, and they get a lot of social buzz about it. So if you can create a lot of buzz, you'll probably get some natural links from that as well. And if you're creating one piece a week of average meh content, you're not going to get that.
Another thing we have to remember is great pieces of content usually do need research, do need more people involved. So like not just a copywriter writing of 500 words. It will have graphics and probably maybe some videos and maybe some like bunch of other people. And that takes time as well. So we kind of have to understand that as an industry, I think, that it's okay to take some more time to publish something great.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, you can find Izabela Wisniewska over at creatosmedia.co.uk. Isabella, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2022.
Thank you.
Check out the rest of the content from SEO in 2022 over at seoin2022.com.